What kind of man can make armed crews surrender before the first shot is fired? Not by magic, by design. Edward Teach, the pirate remembered as Blackbeard, understood a brutal truth long before modern psychology named it. Fear can spread faster than violence. With his towering frame, a beard styled for spectacle, and reported slow-burning matches smoking beneath his hat, he turned himself into something worse than a killer, an omen. But behind the devil image was a colder intelligence, reputation as a weapon, theater as strategy, and terror as logistics. In this video, we strip away the legend and follow the evidence, from Nassau to the blockade of Charlestown to the last blood-soaked minutes at Ocracoke, to uncover how Blackbeard built fear so efficiently that men often broke before battle even began. The Treaty of Utrecht, 1713, stripped thousands of privateer crews of legal work overnight. Their letters of marque expired. The work of licensed raiding became simply piracy. Nassau, on New Providence, absorbed the overflow. The harbor was too shallow for Royal Navy frigates. Crown authority existed on paper only. The docks smelled of rum and hot tar. Tavern keepers knew who had a crew, which ship had slipped out without lights, which manifest lied. Benjamin Hornigold, one of Nassau's founding captains, kept one principle: no attacks on British ships. Teach had sailed under him and held no such principle. When Hornigold took the king's pardon in late 1717 and aligned with the crown, he left Teach with a fleet and no restrictions. On November 28, 1717, Teach intercepted La Concorde de Nantes, a 200-ton French slaving frigate bound for Martinique with 40 guns, enslaved people, gold, and ivory. She should have fought. More than a third of her crew lay sick. The gun teams could barely stand. She surrendered with almost no resistance. Standing on her deck, Teach understood what most commanders learn too late. The decisive weapon is not iron. It is the moment before iron, when the target decides not to fight at all. He renamed the ship Queen Anne's Revenge. That autumn, London issued a royal pardon for any pirate surrendering before September 1718. The news reached Nassau 6 weeks late, held up by storm. Some men saw salvation. Others saw a trap. Teach received word at sea and told no one. The Nassau Harbor Watch saw a dark shape clear the outer marker that night. No lanterns, no flags. He did not write it down. In Nassau, some departures were not recorded. By December 1717, Queen Anne's Revenge was no longer a captured prize. She was a statement. Teach added guns, sloops, and crew until the formation outmatched any colonial merchantman, and no port authority would challenge it without direct orders from London. The Lesser Antilles, St. Kitts, St. Vincent, became a hunting ground. The approach was consistent. Close under sail, raise the flag, wait. Most captains completed the calculation before the range closed. The flag mattered more than the guns. Teach had designed it himself. Black cloth, a skeleton holding an hourglass in one hand and a spear in the other, the tip piercing a heart. Every element read without words. Time is running out. You are already past the point where this ends well. No other pirate flag on record was constructed with this level of deliberate intent. Merchants who had never seen Queen Anne's Revenge could describe the image in detail. The flag traveled faster than any admiralty dispatch. By February 1718, trading captains in Barbados and Kingston were gathering in harbor taverns not to trade, to exchange intelligence. Where was the black flag last sighted? Which heading? The news always arrived late. By the time Kingston learned that 3 ships had been stopped near St. Kitts, Teach was 400 miles away. In March 1718, in the Bay of Honduras, Teach intercepted a sloop commanded by Stede Bonnet, a Barbados planter and former army major who had gone to sea by most accounts to escape a difficult marriage. Bonnet's crew was already dissatisfied with their unusual captain. Teach did not threaten him. He invited Bonnet aboard Queen Anne's Revenge as a guest. More comfortable there, he suggested. While one of Teach's officers assumed command of the sloop, Bonnet accepted. A Bristol clerk aboard a nearby merchant vessel recorded a single line in his journal. He didn't shout. He just looked until everyone went quiet. By spring 1718, the fleet held 4 ships and roughly 250 men, and the fleet was sick. Rotten water in the barrels, tropical fever, dysentery, syphilis. No surgeon, no medicine. Teach understood what experienced captains understand. A fleet that stops moving comes apart. The answer was to move toward a supply source large enough to be compelled. He ordered the navigator to pull the charts for Charleston Harbor. The entrance was narrow. One ship, properly placed, could seal it entirely. The navigator looked at the chart. Teach looked at the chart. The next capture was not a ship, it was a city. Charleston sat on a narrow peninsula where the Ashley and Cooper rivers emptied into the Atlantic. In May 1718, it was the wealthiest port on the colonial American seaboard, and it had no warship in its harbor. Queen Anne's Revenge entered the approach in the first week of May and anchored where the entrance channel narrowed to its minimum. One ship, properly positioned, could hold everything. Within 24 hours, 8 merchant vessels were stopped or trapped. The docks emptied. Captains who had scheduled departures for the following week quietly posted delays, awaiting favorable wind. Nobody said pirates. The waterfront taverns filled. They were completely silent. That was the worst sign. The ultimatum Teach sent to Governor Robert Johnson shocked the colony, not by its violence, but by its banality. He demanded no gold, no ships. He demanded a chest of medicine, mercury compounds for syphilis, cinchona bark for malaria, bandaging cloth, clister pumps, cauterizing iron. The list read like a note from an apothecary. Johnson received it and read it twice, searching for the hidden demand. There was none. 250 sick men needed medicine, and the fastest available source was the nearest city large enough to stock it. Teach dispatched 2 men ashore as official envoys. They vanished for 2 days. It emerged later they had been drinking in a tavern. When Teach learned this from a third party, he did not punish them publicly. That would have shown weakness. He sent others and moved the fleet visibly closer to the harbor mouth. Among the hostages held aboard was Samuel Wragg, a member of the provincial council with direct connections in London. Governor Johnson understood the calculation exactly. If Wragg died, Johnson would answer to the Admiralty for why the wealthiest port in the colonies had no warship assigned to it. This was not a piracy problem. It was a career problem. The medicine chest was assembled and rowed out. The hostages came back alive. Their money, jewelry, and clothing did not. Technically, the terms had been met. That detail moved up the coast faster than any official report. In Boston, the newsletter ran the first account of the blockade. Measured language, no editorializing. The following issue carried 5 inquiries from merchants asking the same question. Where is Queen Anne's Revenge now? The fleet cleared the harbor and turned north. Ahead lay the shallow barrier inlets of Carolina. The navigator spread the charts and pointed to Topsail Inlet. A narrow entrance, a deep, drafted ship. Teach looked at the chart and gave no new order. Whether what followed was navigation or decision, no document settles the question. Topsail Inlet was not on any approach chart for a vessel of Queen Anne's Revenge's draft. The entrance was shallow, narrow, and tidal, safe for light coastal sloops, hazardous for anything heavier. Every experienced sailor aboard knew it. On June 10th, 1718, Teach held course. The ship grounded hard on the bar and would not move. What followed was efficient. The sloop Adventure, still afloat nearby, received everything transferable: shot, powder, provisions, weapons. The work took all day under a sun that softened the tar between deck planks. By evening, Queen Anne's Revenge had listed to starboard and was beginning its slow dissolution into the sand. David Harriet, captain of Adventure before Teach absorbed him into the fleet, later testified that the approach defied any rational navigational logic. A 40-gun frigate with deep draft does not enter a shallow inlet by accident. The ship disappears, the crew scatters, all outstanding claims dissolve with the hull. The ship's log went down with it. Whether this was navigation or decision, no document answers directly. Harriet answered it plainly. It was a decision. Teach loaded 20 men onto Adventure and left. Stede Bonnet's vessel he left where it sat, after removing its sails. 25 men he left on a low sand island. No shade, no fresh water, no food. They sat there 2 days, until Bonnet returned from Bath with a pardon and found them. It is the only documented act of mutual aid in the entire fleet's history. Bonnet came back to a stripped ship and dispersed crew. He returned to piracy alone, a choice that brought him eventually to a Charleston gallows. In Bath, roughly 100 houses, a sawmill, a small tidal dock. Teach arrived in clean clothes, unarmed, calm. Governor Charles Eden received him. The pardon was entered within days. The clerk recorded it plainly. Edward Teach and 20 men accepted pardon, June 26, 1718. Eden knew who stood before him. What passed between them left no direct record. Within weeks, Teach crossed the governor's threshold as a guest and left with the standing of local authority. A few weeks later, Teach sat at a table with Tobias Knight, Secretary of the Council, Customs Collector, the most powerful official in Carolina after Eden. Knight listened more than he spoke. No document records the meeting, but a letter in Knight's hand, written months later, would become the most consequential piece of evidence in the case. Bath in the summer of 1718 was a town of 80 houses, a sawmill, and tidal marshes that steamed from July through September. Teach settled here as a private citizen. He kept a house, filed paperwork through the governor's clerk, and registered adventure as a legal coastal trader. The documents were correctly dated, properly signed, properly sealed. Everything conformed to the law. He went to sea between filings. In the weeks following his pardon, attacks on small vessels along the Carolina and Virginia coasts did not decrease. They became quieter. The mechanism worked as follows. Teach intercepted a French merchant vessel and reported to Eden that he had found the ship abandoned at sea. No crew aboard, no flag flying. Eden convened a prize court in Bath. Officials examined the manifest. The cargo was declared lawful salvage and auctioned. Tobias Knight, Secretary of the Council and Customs Collector, received his portion. Eden received his. The French crew, put ashore somewhere without witnesses, appeared in no protocol. It was the first time the colonial government did not merely ignore Teach. It produced official documents in active support of his operations. Carolina merchants who understood what was happening wrote privately to Williamsburg. A formal complaint to their own governor was useless. The governor was part of the arrangement. Alexander Spotswood, governor of Virginia, received 5, then 6 such letters. He laid them against a map. Every account pointed to the same stretch of water between Bath and Ocracoke Inlet. On July 10, 1718, Spotswood issued a proclamation requiring former pirates to surrender weapons and avoid gatherings of more than 3 men. The text addressed Virginia. The intent was elsewhere. He did not request authorization from London. A transatlantic exchange would take 6 months. Instead, he privately financed 2 shallow draft sloops suited to the Carolina barrier inlets. He did not inform Eden. Then Knight made an error. He wrote Teach a personal letter, carefully worded, no explicit statements, warning that preparations were underway in Virginia and advising caution. The letter was delivered at sea. Teach read it and kept it among his papers. Knight likely assumed the letter would be destroyed, or that it would not matter who found it. He miscalculated on both counts. Ocracoke Inlet in November smelled of salt marsh and Atlantic wind off Bear Scrub Islands. The water was gray and shallow. A Royal Navy frigate could not operate there. A light sloop with a pilot who knew the bottom could. On November 17th, 2 sloops cleared the Chesapeake without lights. Lieutenant Robert Maynard stood at the stern reading the chart in fading daylight. He knew where Teach was anchored. Teach did not yet know Maynard existed, but Knight's letter, still folded in the cabin, was about to become the most important document in the case, just not in the way Knight intended. The morning of November 22nd came in gray. Ocracoke Inlet smelled of tidal mud and cold Atlantic wind off Bear Scrub Islands. The water was opaque. Fog had settled into the marshes overnight. The evening before, Teach had spent the night aboard Adventure with the captain of a nearby merchant vessel. He knew Knight's letter had warned of preparations in Virginia. He had not moved deeper into the inlets. No one who built a career on precise calculations of risk simply forgets to calculate. Whether he believed no one would come or no longer cared, no document answers. At first light, Maynard brought his 2 sloops up the channel without lanterns, using a local pilot who knew the bottom. Ranger grounded on a sandbar before the engagement began. Maynard continued with Jane alone. 35 men against Adventure's 8 guns. Teach's first broadside killed or wounded more than a quarter of Jane's crew. The deck went quiet in seconds. Maynard ordered every able man below and left the upper deck empty. Adventure came alongside to board a ship that appeared to have no one left standing. When Teach's men came over the rail, Maynard gave the order to come up. What followed was close and without structure. Teach took 5 gunshot wounds and more than 20 cuts before he went down. He died on Jane's deck. Maynard secured the head to the bowsprit before raising anchor. This was not ceremony. It was evidence for the Admiralty record. 16 survivors were transported to Williamsburg. The tribunal ran under standard Admiralty procedure, the same forms used from London to Cape Coast. 14 were hanged. In Teach's cabin, the search party found papers. Among them, Knight's letter. Spotswood now held documentary proof that the Carolina government had been producing legal documents to cover Teach's operations. The Carolina Council reviewed the evidence and acquitted Knight. He died shortly afterward. Eden governed the colony 3 more years. In Bath, within hours of the news, a witness whose name was never recorded saw a crate of documents carried from the governor's chancery and loaded onto a tidal boat. The papers were never found. Teach's head hung on a post near Hampton, Virginia. Coastal captains passed it in every weather. Some looked, others did not. The insurance rates on Carolina routes dropped for the first time in 2 years. The docks filled. Trade resumed. The town returned to what it had always been, a place where money outlasts memory.